The manifest listed 19 passengers for the 9:15 p.m. crossing. The gate log counted 19 boarding. The closed-circuit camera on the vehicle deck recorded 19 entering. When we docked at Hughes Landing 22 minutes later, I counted 17 walking off. No one went overboard. No alarms triggered. No vehicle was unaccounted for. 17 people left the boat. I've watched the footage 11 times now. 19 get on. You can see every face. And then at some point during the crossing, I can't find the moment, I've tried, the camera just shows 17. As if there were only ever 17. As if the number 19 was a mistake I made with my own eyes. But the manifest still says 19. I need to explain how I got here. My name is Corinne Allen. I'm 38. I've operated commercial passenger vessels in Penobscot Bay and the Outer Islands for 11 years, first as a deckhand for a private water taxi service, then as a licensed master for the Hughes Island Ferry Association, which is a quasi-municipal nonprofit that runs the only scheduled crossing between Hughes Island and the mainland terminal at Kitteridge Point. It's a short run, maybe 2 nautical miles depending on the tide, serving a year-round population of about 400 and a summer population that swells to close to 1,200. One vessel, the M/V Abenaki, a 65-foot steel-hull passenger and vehicle ferry, certified for 30 vehicles or 80 passengers, powered by twin Cummins diesels. She's old and honest and I know every sound she makes. The association operates on a shoestring. We have 5 full-time employees, 2 licensed masters, 2 deckhands, and a terminal agent who handles ticketing, scheduling, and the bookkeeping. In the summer we bring on 3 seasonal deckhands. The boat runs 7 round trips a day from May through September, 5 in the shoulder months, and 3 in winter. There's a board of directors made up of island residents, and they meet quarterly to argue about the fare structure and the maintenance budget. It is, in every meaningful way, a small-town operation held together by habit and necessity. I took the master's position in 2019 after Gil Tessier retired. Gil had run the ferry for 26 years. He was the kind of man who could smell weather changing before the barometer moved, who knew every lobster buoy and ledge in the bay by feel. He didn't leave a manual. He left a boat that ran well because he'd been on it every day for a quarter century, and a spiral-bound notebook in the wheelhouse that contained, among tide tables and engine notes, a single laminated page that was clearly older than anything else in the book. I didn't read it carefully at first. It was tucked between a page of radio frequencies and a pencil sketch of the approach to the mainland dock at various tide stages. It appeared to be a set of operational guidelines specific to fog crossings, typed on what looked like a typewriter, undated, and signed, with no association letterhead. Just 12 numbered items. Some were mundane. Reduce speed to dead slow within 500 yards of either terminal. Sound the horn at 1-minute intervals. Confirm passenger count before departure and upon arrival. Post a lookout on the bow with a handheld VHF. Standard fog protocol for any inland waterway operation. But 3 of the items were not standard. Item 4 read, do not adjust course to investigate any light source not confirmed by radar and chart. Item 9 read, if passenger count upon arrival does not match departure manifest, do not recount. File the arrival number. Proceed with offloading. Item 11 read, between October 15th and March 31st, if fog persists past the 7:45 p.m. departure, cancel the 9:15 p.m. crossing. Do not offer explanation beyond mechanical delay. Resume schedule the following morning. I remember reading item 9 and almost laughing. It sounded like an artifact of Gil's neurotic record-keeping. Maybe he'd had trouble getting accurate counts on busy summer days and decided it wasn't worth the argument. Item 11 seemed overly cautious but understandable for a winter schedule with low ridership. Item 4 was just good seamanship. I laminated the page again after it got coffee on it, put it back in the notebook, and didn't think about it for almost 8 months. The first winter I ran the boat was unremarkable. Fog in the bay is common enough that you learn to operate in it the way you learn to operate in the dark. It becomes a condition, not an event. The radar on the Abenaki is a Furuno 1835, commercial grade, reliable. I had a new AIS transponder installed in the fall. Between the instruments and the fact that I could practically drive the crossing blindfolded after 200 repetitions, fog didn't concern me much. December that year, we had a stretch of unusually warm weather. Southerly flow off the Gulf of Maine pushed moisture over the cold coastal water, and we got fog, real fog, not the light haze that burns off by 10, for 6 consecutive days. Thick, wet, ceiling-to-deck whiteout fog that reduced visibility to maybe 40 feet. On the third evening of that stretch, I was running the 7:45 departure from the island. 11 passengers, 3 vehicles. We cast off into what I can only describe as a wall. The air was so saturated that the running lights barely penetrated past the bow rail. My deckhand, Tom, was on the bow with the radio. I was in the wheelhouse watching the radar and tracking our heading on the GPS plotter. About halfway across, maybe 1,000 yards from Kitteridge, Tom called up on the VHF. "Skipper, I've got a light off the port bow. Maybe 200 yards. Steady white." I checked the radar. Nothing. I checked the AIS. Nothing. I checked the chart plotter for any moored vessel or navigational aid in that position. Nothing. Confirmed negative on radar, I told him. No target. Probably a reflection off the fog. It's not a reflection. It's moving. I looked out the port window. I couldn't see anything. The fog was absolute. "I don't have it, Tom. Stay on the bow. Keep calling what you see." He was quiet for maybe 30 seconds. Then, "It's gone." We docked without incident. I counted 11 passengers off. Everything matched. But that night I went back to the wheelhouse to write up the log, and I pulled out Gil's notebook, and I read item 4 again. Do not adjust course to investigate any light source not confirmed by radar and chart. And I realized that the item wasn't telling me to be cautious. It was telling me that lights in the fog that didn't match radar were a known condition. Known enough that someone had written it down. Known enough that the correct response had been codified. That changed the way I read the other items. The warm spell broke 2 days later and the fog cleared, and I put it out of my mind through the rest of the winter and into the spring. We were busy with the seasonal ramp-up, painting, engine service, Coast Guard inspection. Tom left in February for a job on a tugboat in Portland, and I hired a new deckhand named Marin Kelsey, 24, recently graduated from Maine Maritime with her AB ticket. She was sharp, quiet, and asked good questions. I liked her immediately. It was the following October when things began. October 17th. 2 days past the date in item 11. The fog had come back, not the same warm weather pattern, but a cold, heavy radiation fog that settled into the bay after sunset and stayed until mid-morning. It was the kind of fog that doesn't move. It just sits there, dense as wool, and the world contracts to the distance of your own arm. The 7:45 p.m. crossing went fine. 4 passengers, 1 truck. We docked, I offloaded, I confirmed the count. 4. I checked the weather for the 9:15. Fog was holding. Visibility reported at Rockland was under a quarter mile. By the laminated page, I should have cancelled. But I had 3 passengers waiting at the island terminal. One of them was Helen Foss, 71, who had a dialysis appointment in Rockland at 6 the following morning and needed to be on the mainland tonight. I'd known Helen for years. She sat on the association board. She was one of the reasons the ferry existed. I called the mainland terminal agent, Paula, and told her I was going to run the 9:15. She didn't argue. There was no policy against it, the laminated page wasn't association policy. It was Gil's personal note. It had no institutional authority. We loaded. 3 passengers, no vehicles. Helen, a younger man I didn't recognize who had a backpack and hiking boots, and Donna Pratt, who ran the island gift shop and was going to the mainland for supplies. I counted them on. 3. Marin took the bow. I took the wheelhouse. We cast off at 9:17. The crossing was routine for the first 4 minutes. Dead slow, horn sounding, radar clear, GPS tracking. The engines hummed their usual low diesel note. The fog was so thick that I couldn't see the bow from the wheelhouse. Marin was a voice on the radio and nothing more. At approximately 9:21, Marin called up. "Skipper. I'm hearing something off the starboard side. Low frequency. Like an engine, but not quite." I listened. Through the open wheelhouse window, over the sound of our own diesels, I could hear something. A rhythmic, throbbing sound, not mechanical, exactly, but regular. Like a large heartbeat amplified through water. I checked the radar. Clear. Nothing within half a mile in any direction. Could be a lobster boat running without AIS, I said. They do that. It's not a boat, Marin said. It's under us. I paused. Say again. It's coming from beneath the hull. I can feel it through the deck plates. I stopped the engines. In the silence, I heard it. Through the steel hull of the Abenaki, conducted up through the keel and the frames and the deck plating and into the soles of my shoes, a rhythmic pulse. Low, slow, and enormous. Not vibration from our own machinery. Not cavitation or prop wash or anything I'd felt in 11 years on this boat or any other. Something beneath the ferry was producing a sound, or a pressure wave, that I could feel in my skeleton. I restarted the engines and increased to standard speed, which I shouldn't have done in that fog but which my body demanded. Marin, stay on the bow. Call out anything. Copy. We made the mainland in 6 minutes. I docked harder than I should have, bumped the pilings, didn't care. 3 passengers walked off. I counted them. Helen. Donna. The young man with the backpack. 3 off. 3 on. Numbers matched. But as I was shutting down the wheelhouse for the night, I looked at the radar playback. The Furuno has a trail function that records the last 60 minutes of sweeps. Our track was a clean line from island to mainland, as expected. Except there was a second track. A return signal, large, formless, not a vessel, more like a density change in the water, that had paralleled us on the starboard side from approximately the midpoint of the crossing to within 200 yards of the mainland dock. It had appeared at 9:21. the exact minute Marin heard the sound. And it had disappeared at 9:26, the minute we entered the terminal approach channel. I saved the playback to a USB drive. Then I went home and sat in my kitchen and read the laminated page again from top to bottom. Item 11 told me to cancel that crossing. I hadn't canceled it. Item 4 told me not to investigate anomalous signals. I hadn't investigated, but only because I was too frightened to stop again. Item 9 told me what to do if the count didn't match. I started to understand that item 9 wasn't about administrative convenience. It was about what happens when you start looking for the discrepancy. I didn't tell Marin. I didn't tell anyone. I filed the log with correct passenger counts and a note about unusual acoustic interference, possible marine mammal activity. I've written enough logs to know how to make something disappear into plausible language. For 2 weeks, the weather was clear. No fog. The crossings were normal. I began to feel foolish. On November 2nd, the fog returned. This time it came in fast, during the afternoon, and by the 5:30 p.m. crossing it was solid. I ran the 5:30 without incident. The 7:45 was the last scheduled run before the 9:15, and I ran that too, 6 passengers, all regulars. No anomalies. By 8:30, I was looking at the manifest for the 9:15. 2 passengers had bought tickets, a mainland commuter named Paul Driscoll who worked construction on the island, and a woman I didn't know, name on the ticket, S. Collimore. The fog was absolute. Visibility was 0. I should have cancelled. Item 11 was clear. But I thought about what I'd felt 2 weeks earlier. The pulse beneath the hull. The radar shadow. And I thought, if I cancel every time there's fog past 7:45 in the winter, I will eventually have to explain why, and I have no explanation that doesn't sound insane. So I ran it. Paul Driscoll was waiting at the island terminal. He was a big man, quiet, reliable, the kind of passenger you want on a winter ferry. He nodded at me as he walked on. S. Collimore wasn't there. I waited until 9:20. No one else came. Paula radioed from the mainland, no one waiting on that end either. 1 passenger. We cast off at 9:22. Marin on the bow. Me in the wheelhouse. Paul Driscoll sitting in the enclosed passenger cabin, reading something on his phone. The crossing was silent. No pulse. No anomalous radar contacts. The fog sat on the water like a living thing, but nothing stirred in it or beneath it. We docked at 9:41. I counted 1 passenger off. Paul Driscoll walked to his truck in the parking lot, started it, and drove away. I was relieved. I was so relieved that I almost didn't check the manifest. But I did. The departure manifest, the one I'd initialed before casting off, listed 2 passengers. Paul Driscoll and S. Collimore. I had watched S. Collimore not arrive. I had waited for her. I had noted her absence. I had departed with 1 passenger. But my own initials were next to a manifest that said 2. I went to the gate log. The electronic turnstile at the island terminal records every ticket scan with a timestamp. 2 entries, 9:14 p.m., Driscoll, Paul. 9:16 p.m., Collimore, S. She had scanned her ticket. 2 minutes after Paul. 2 minutes before I started looking for her on the dock. She had scanned through the gate and I had not seen her. I checked the passenger cabin camera. The footage showed Paul Driscoll sitting alone for the duration of the crossing. One person boarded. One person was recorded in the cabin. One person disembarked. But the gate said 2. And the manifest, with my initials, said 2. I didn't refile the count. I remembered item 9. File the arrival number. I filed 1. But I couldn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the manifest. 2 names, my handwriting next to both, and I had no memory of writing the second. The next morning I searched the association's ticketing system for S. Collimore. The name appeared once, the ticket purchased for the November 2nd 9:15 crossing. Payment method, cash. No phone number, no email, no island address. I searched the island directory. No Collimore. I searched the county records. No Collimore in the tax rolls, the voter registration, the utility accounts. I searched the cemetery. There was a Collimore. Sarah Collimore. 1847 to 1891. Buried in the old section of the Hughes Island Cemetery, the part that overlooks the eastern shore, the part that faces the mainland. I told myself it was a coincidence. On November 9th, I was running the 745 in clear weather, no fog, stars visible, calm sea. 13 passengers, normal manifest. I counted 13 boarding. Marin counted 13. We crossed without incident. I counted 13 off. But when I reviewed the manifest to file it, a 14th name was written at the bottom of the list. E. Hughes. In my handwriting. I hadn't written it. I knew I hadn't written it. My pen had been in my jacket pocket since before departure. Marin had handled the clipboard. I asked Marin how many passengers she'd counted. 13, she said. Same as the manifest. I looked at the clipboard in her hands. She turned it so I could see. 13 names. I took the clipboard from her. I looked at the page. 14 names. I handed it back. How many names on that list, Marin? She looked. 13. I took the clipboard a third time. 14 names. E. Hughes at the bottom, in handwriting that was mine. Marin could not see it. That was when I called Gil Tessier. He was living in Ellsworth, retired, 81 years old, and he answered the phone on the second ring as if he'd been waiting. Gil, I said, I need to ask you about the laminated page. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, which item? 9. Another silence. Did you cancel the late crossing? No. How many times? Twice. I heard him exhale. Corinne, listen to me. Did you recount? No. Good. Don't ever recount. File whatever number walks off. That's the real number. The manifest will say what it wants. You file what your eyes see leaving the boat. Never what the paper says got on. Gil, there are names on the manifest that I didn't write. In my handwriting. I know. You know. It's been happening since before me. Walt Eaton ran the boat before I did, 1961 to 1993. He's the one who wrote the page. He told me the same thing you're telling me now, and I didn't believe him either until I saw the names. What are they? People who need to cross. Gil, that doesn't mean anything. It means exactly what it means. There are people who need to cross. They buy tickets. They pass through the gate. They board the boat. And some of them don't arrive on the other side. That's not your failure, and it's not the boat's failure, and it's not something you can fix. It's the crossing. It takes what it takes and it delivers what it delivers, and the only thing you can control is what number you write down at the end. Where do they go? I don't know. I ran that boat for 26 years and I don't know. But I'll tell you what I do know: they don't go overboard. They don't go into the water. They aren't on the boat and then they aren't on the boat, and there is no moment in between. The cameras won't show you. The radar won't show you. The count is the only thing that tells the truth. Gill, Item 11. Why cancel the 9:15 in fog after October 15th? Because in fog, after dark, in the cold months, more of them buy tickets. And the more of them that board, the harder it is to count who's real. I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to tell him he was an old man with old superstitions and that the bay was just water and the boat was just steel. But I had a manifest with a name I didn't write and a gate log with a skin I didn't see, and both were in the system now, permanent, irretrievable, and real. I started keeping my own count. Not on the manifest. I left the manifest alone, let it say what it wanted. I kept a pocket notebook, and every crossing, I wrote down what I physically saw. How many bodies walked on? How many bodies walked off? For 3 weeks, the numbers matched. Every time. Even on foggy crossings. Even on the late run. 13 and 13. 6 and 6. 2 and 2. My count and the manifest in perfect agreement. I began to doubt myself again. I began to think Gill was a troubled old man and I was a tired woman in a stressful job, and the whole thing was a pattern recognition error exacerbated by isolation and fog and a piece of laminated paper that had planted ideas in my head. Then came December 3rd. Fog. Heavy, cold, absolute. I'd been awake since 4 in the morning because the diesel heater in my apartment had tripped its safety cutoff and I'd had to reset it. I was tired in a way that made the world feel thin. The 9:15 manifest listed 4 passengers. I checked the gate log before casting off, 4 scans. I stood at the gangway and counted them boarding. 1. A teenager, maybe 16, headphones on, walking fast. Island kid, I'd seen him before. 2. An older woman with a rolling suitcase. Not a regular. 3. A man in a dark coat, middle-aged, who nodded at me without making eye contact. 4. Another man, younger, carrying a canvas bag. Smiled at me. Said, "Cold one." 4 passengers. I wrote it in my notebook. I initialed the manifest without looking at it. The crossing was 17 minutes. No anomalies. No pulse beneath the hull. The fog was thick but the radar was clean and the GPS held its track. We docked. I stood at the gangway again and counted. 1. The teenager. 2. The woman with the suitcase. 3. The man in the dark coat. 3. I waited. No one else came through the passenger cabin door. Marin was securing the bow line. I called to her. "Marin, did you see a 4th passenger?" 4 got on. "I don't know, let me check the cabin." She went inside. Came back out. "Empty, skipper. Everyone's off." 3 people had walked off my boat. I looked at my notebook. For boarding. I looked at the gangway. 3 disembarked. I could still see all 3 of them walking up the ramp toward the parking lot. A young man with a canvas bag smiled at me. Said, "Cold one." I could picture his face. I could hear his voice. He had been real. He had occupied space. He had walked past me close enough that I could have touched his sleeve. He was not among the 3 people who left. I didn't recount. I filed 3. That night, I pulled the gate log. 4 scans, 908, 910, 911, 913. 4 ticket numbers. I looked up the ticket purchased at 913, the last scan, which would have been the 4th passenger, the young man. The ticket had been purchased that afternoon at the island terminal, cash, no name given. The system assigned it a transaction number, but the name field was blank. I pulled the security camera footage from the island terminal. The camera covers the ticket window and the gate. At 9:13, the gate turnstile rotated. The ticket scanner logged the entry. No one was visible on the camera. The gate opened for no one. I watched it 5 times. The turnstile bar physically moves. It rotates 1 full click, exactly as it does when a person pushes through it. But the camera shows an empty gate. I'd stood at the gangway and watched a young man board my ferry. He'd spoken to me. He had mass and voice and a canvas bag and a smile. He had not triggered the camera. He had triggered the gate. I kept running the ferry. What else was I going to do? Quit. The island needed the boat. I needed the work. And the thing, whatever it was, had never harmed anyone. The passengers who vanished between boarding and arrival were not passengers I could identify, not people the island claimed, not people anyone was looking for. They were names on a manifest that no one checked closely enough to notice, or faces that I saw once and could not connect to any life on either side of the water. Until January 14th. Clear night. No fog. Cold, maybe 12 degrees, northwest wind at 15 knots. The 7:45 crossing, last run of the day in the winter schedule. 7 passengers. I counted them on. I knew all 7, small island, winter residents, people I saw every week. We crossed. Clean run. 16 minutes. I counted them off. 6. I didn't have to look at the manifest to know who was missing. I'd known all 7. I knew the 6 who walked off. The one who didn't was Alan Proctor. Alan was 44. He was a carpenter. He'd been on the island 12 years. He had a wife, Linda, and a 10-year-old son named Caleb. He attended the volunteer fire department meetings on Tuesday nights. He owed me $40 from a poker game the previous spring that he always said he'd pay me next time. Alan Proctor boarded my ferry and did not arrive. There was no splash. No alarm. No moment. Marin had been in the cabin for the entire crossing doing an inventory of the life jackets. She hadn't seen Alan leave because Alan hadn't left. He had simply ceased to be aboard. The passenger cabin camera showed 6 people sitting in 6 seats for the entire 17-minute crossing. Alan was not in the footage. He'd boarded, I'd watched him step onto the car deck and walk through the cabin door, and then the footage showed 6 people and always 6 people, as if there had never been a 7th. I filed 6. I followed item 9. I followed it because I didn't know what else to do and because the alternative was to start screaming in a parking lot at 10 o'clock at night in January. Linda Proctor called me the next morning to ask if Alan had taken the ferry. I said yes. She said he hadn't come home. I said I didn't know what to tell her. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days. They found nothing. The investigation concluded that Alan Proctor likely went overboard during the crossing, possibly due to a medical episode, and was carried away by the tidal current. The water temperature in Penobscot Bay in January is approximately 37 degrees. Survival time is measured in minutes. I submitted my footage. The Coast Guard reviewed it. They noted that their count showed 6 passengers for the entire crossing and asked whether I was certain Mr. Proctor had boarded. I said yes. I said I'd watched him walk on. They noted this as a discrepancy and closed the file. I went to see Gil again. I drove to Ellsworth and sat in his kitchen and told him about Alan. Gil looked at his hands for a long time. It never took anyone I knew, he said finally. 26 years. It took them, but they were always, I don't know how to say it. They were always people I couldn't quite place. People I should have recognized but didn't. People who were on the manifest but not in the world. Alan was in the world, Gil. I know. He had a wife. He had a kid. I know. What changed? Gil looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked frightened. Not of the bay or the boat or the fog. Of me. You ran the 9:15, he said. After October. In fog. Twice. Yes. Item 11 isn't a suggestion, Corinne. Walt Eaton lost his brother on the 9:15 in 1978. In fog. That's why he wrote it down. Whatever crosses with you in the fog, it doesn't always get off at the dock. Sometimes it stays on the boat. And when it stays on the boat starts counting differently. Counting what? Passengers. The boat counts passengers. That's what it does. It crosses and it counts. And when the fog lets extra things aboard, the count gets hungry. It needs to come out even. And if it can't take what it brought, it takes what was already there. I didn't believe him. I couldn't afford to believe him because believing him meant I'd killed Alan Proctor by running a late crossing in October because I didn't want to inconvenience Helen Foss. But I followed item 11 after that. Every time. If fog was holding at 7:45, I cancelled the 9:15 and I cited mechanical delay and I absorbed the complaints and I let the board grumble about lost revenue. I followed it through the rest of that winter and through the next year and the year after that. And for 23 months, the count held. My notebook matched the manifest. Nobody vanished. The names I saw boarding were the names I saw departing and the cameras agreed and the gate logs agreed and everything was whole. I started to think Gil was wrong. I started to think Alan had gone overboard and the cameras had malfunctioned and I'd miscounted and the fog was just weather and the bay was just water. Then came October this year. 3 weeks ago. October 1st. The fog started early. It came in at noon and didn't lift. By the 5:30 crossing, visibility was down to 50 feet. By the 7:45, I couldn't see the water from the wheelhouse. I ran the 7:45. 19 passengers. I counted them on. I counted them at the dock. 17 walked off. 2 people were on my boat and then they weren't. No fog. Not the 9:15. Not the late crossing. The The 7:45, before the cutoff, before the window that item 11 was supposed to close. I checked the footage. 17 people in the cabin for the entire crossing. The manifest said 19. The gate said 19. My notebook said 19. And the doc said 17. I filed 17. I went home. I pulled out Gill's laminated page and read it again, all 12 items, and I realized something I'd missed for 5 years. Item 11 says, between October 15th and March 31st, if fog persists past the 7:45 p.m. departure, cancel the 9:15 p.m. crossing. It doesn't say the 7:45 is safe. It says cancel the 9:15 if fog persists past the 7:45. The 7:45 is the last crossing you run. Item 11 isn't protecting the 9:15. It's acknowledging that if the fog is still there after you've already made the 7:45 run, the 9:15 is when the count stops pretending to work at all. The 7:45 was never safe. None of the crossings are safe. The laminated page doesn't prevent anything. It manages the rate. I called Gill. The number was disconnected. I drove to Ellsworth. His apartment was empty. The landlord said he'd moved out in August. No forwarding address. He said Gill had seemed fine. He said Gill had mentioned something about going home. Gill Tessier was born on Hughes Island. He'd lived on the mainland since retirement. Going home would mean taking the ferry. I checked the association ticketing records. There was no ticket purchased under Gill's name in August or any month after. I checked the gate logs. Nothing. I called the island. Nobody had seen Gill. I pulled every manifest from August. I read every name. On August 22nd, the 5:30 p.m. crossing from Kitteridge to Hughes, the manifest listed 18 passengers. I'd been off that day. My alternate, Derek, had run the boat. I called Derek. How many passengers on your 5:30, August 22nd? He checked his notes. 17. Light day. The manifest said 18. Derek counted 17. The 18th name on the manifest, written in Derek's handwriting, was G. Tessier. Gill had crossed. He'd scanned a ticket and walked through the gate and boarded the ferry, and somewhere between the mainland and the island, between the place he'd lived and the place he was born, he'd become part of the count. I'm still running the ferry. I ran it today. I'll run it tomorrow. The island needs the boat, and I'm the only master on the winter schedule since Derek took a leave of absence last week, said he needed time, wouldn't say for what. I think he looked at the manifests. I think he started counting. The fog came back this morning. It's been sitting on the bay all day, thick and still, and the forecast says it'll hold through the weekend. I've already canceled the 9:15 for tonight. I'll cancel it every night the fog holds. But I ran the 7:45. 11 passengers. I counted every one. I watched every face. I wrote every name in my notebook with my own hand. 11 on. 11 off. The manifest says 12. The 12th name is mine. It's in my handwriting. It's on the line below the last passenger. Neat, clear, unmistakable. Alan, C. I don't know what happens when the count decides you've boarded. I don't know if there's a crossing where I step onto the boat and don't step off. I don't know if it's the next run or the one after that or one 10 years from now. But the boat is counting me now. It has been, I think, Since the first time I ran the 9:15 in the fog and felt that pulse through the deck and knew, before I had any words for it, that the water in this bay is keeping track. I'm going to leave this account in the wheelhouse, in Gil's notebook, in the place where the laminated page lives. Whoever takes the boat next will find it. Follow the items. All 12. Follow them exactly. And when the count doesn't match, and it won't, not always, not on the nights when the fog sits heavy on the water and the bay hums beneath you like something breathing in its sleep, file the number that walks off. Don't recount. Don't look at the manifest until you're alone. And if you see your own name at the bottom of the list, in handwriting you recognize as yours, keep running the boat. The island needs the crossing. The people are real, most of them, and they need to get home. Just understand that the fare has never been money. And some tickets get punched before you know you've bought them. I learned that the hard way. You don't choose when the bay opens an account in your name. You just wake up one morning and the ledger has a line with your initials, and the balance is already running, and there's no window at the terminal where you can walk up and say, "I'd like to close this out, please." I know that now because of what happened on October 4th. 3 days after I found my name on the manifest. 3 days of running the boat with the knowledge that the count had included me. 3 days of standing at the gangway, watching passengers board, watching passengers leave, and feeling the particular quality of attention that the Abenaki paid to me, not mechanical, not sentient, but something between the two, like the way a scale notices the weight placed on it. October 4th was a Saturday. Clear morning, no fog, wind out of the northeast at about 8 knots. The 7:30 a.m. departure from Hughes to the mainland. First run of the day. I always liked the early crossing. The light on the bay at that hour has a quality that makes you forgive the cold and the early alarm, silver blue, with the island standing dark against it, and the lobster boats already out and working their strings, their diesel exhaust rising straight up in the still air. 12 passengers. I counted them. All regulars, the commuters heading to mainland jobs, a couple of retirees going to appointments, Marin's mother June who volunteered at the hospital gift shop on Saturdays. I knew every face. 12 on. Marin confirmed. Halfway across, I glanced at the radar. Clean. Then I glanced at the passenger cabin monitor, the small black and white screen mounted above the helm console that shows a live feed from the cabin camera. 13 people. I counted again, carefully, using the seats. The cabin on the Abenaki has 24 fixed seats in 6 rows of 4. 12 of those seats were occupied by the 12 passengers I'd watched board. The 13th person was sitting in the back row, port side, in the seat closest to the bulkhead. They were wearing a dark jacket, I couldn't tell much more than that on the small monitor. They were sitting upright, facing forward, hands in their lap. I keyed the intercom. "Marin, could you step into the cabin and do a visual count for me?" "Sure, skipper." 1 second. I watched the monitor. Marin entered the cabin from the forward door, walked slowly down the center aisle, counting silently, I could see her lips moving. She reached the back, turned, walked back to the front. She keyed her radio. 12, skipper. Same as the board count. I looked at the monitor. 13 people. Marin had walked directly past the 13th person. Her eyes had passed over the seat where someone was sitting. Marin. Back row, port side, last seat against the bulkhead. Is that seat occupied? Pause. I watched her turn on the monitor and look. Negative. That seat's empty. On my screen, the figure sat motionless, facing forward, as still as if they were carved from the same steel as the hull. Copy. Thanks, Marin. We docked. I counted 12 off. The manifest said 13, there it was again, that extra name, printed at the bottom in my handwriting, neat as a typed line, Hughes, R. Different initial this time. Not E. Hughes, like before. R. Hughes. I checked the cabin on my way through. Every seat empty. No personal effects. No warmth in the cushion of the back port seat. Nothing. That afternoon, I went to the island cemetery again. The Hughes plot is one of the oldest on the island, the family the island was named for, settlers from the 1770s. The stones are worn but legible if you know what you're looking at. R. Hughes. Robert Hughes. 1788 to 1824. Lost at sea. E. Hughes, from the earlier manifest, Eliza Hughes. 1803 to 1841. No cause of death listed. They were both buried in the same row, facing east, facing the water, facing the mainland they would have reached by boat when boats were the only way on or off. I started keeping a second notebook. The first one was my boarding count, what I saw with my eyes. The second one was for the names. Every extra name that appeared on a manifest in my handwriting. I logged the date, the crossing time, the name, and whatever I could find in the cemetery or the Island Historical Society records. By October 15th, I had 9 names. S. Collimore, November 2nd, prior year. Sarah Collimore, 1847 to 1891. E. Hughes, November 9th, prior year. Eliza Hughes, 1803 to 1841. G. Tessier, August 22nd, Derek's Manifest. Gilbert Tessier, born 1943. Status, missing. Allen, C., October 1st. Myself. R. Hughes, October 4th. Robert Hughes, 1788 to 1824. M. Cousins, October 7th, 5:30 p.m. Margaret Cousins, 1862 to 1909. J. Billings, October 10th, 7:30 a.m. No cemetery record found. No island record. T. Foss, October 13th, 3 p.m. Thomas Foss, 1921 to 1967. Helen Foss's father-in-law. A. Proctor, October 14th, 7:45 p.m. I stared at that last entry for a long time. A. Proctor. On the manifest of a crossing I'd run the previous evening. Written in my hand at the bottom of a list of 9 passengers, all of whom had boarded and all of whom had disembarked. The count was perfect, 9 on, 9 off. No discrepancy. But Allen's name was there. As if he'd ridden along. As if he'd bought a ticket and taken his seat and crossed the bay the way he'd crossed it 500 times before, only this time he was in the part of the count that I couldn't see and Marin couldn't see and the cameras couldn't see. Allen Proctor, who'd been gone for almost 2 years, was still commuting. I didn't cry. I should have. I sat in the wheelhouse with the manifest in my lap and the overhead light buzzing and the diesel heaters ticking as they cooled, and I felt something settle into my chest that was heavier than grief. It was the understanding that the bay wasn't malicious. It wasn't hunting. It wasn't taking people to hurt them or erase them or punish anyone. It was running a ferry service. A different one. On a different schedule. with a passenger list that drew from a different population. But the function was the same, people who needed to cross were crossing. The Abenaki was their boat too. The count was the count, and it included everyone, and the only thing the laminated page was really trying to say was that the living needed to keep their number separate from the dead's or the whole manifest would become unreadable. That understanding didn't comfort me. It made it worse. Because if the bay was just doing what it had always done, moving people between here and there, faithfully, on schedule, then there was no villain and no fix and no way to fight it. You don't fight the tide. You don't fight the crossing. You run the boat and you keep count and you accept that some of the passengers are yours and some of them aren't, and you will never fully know which is which. The fog came back on October 16th. Right on schedule, as if it had read the laminated page and knew the season had opened. I cancelled the 9:15. I've cancelled every 9:15 since. I will continue to cancel them for as long as I have this job. But the 7:45 on October 16th was a crossing I had to make. 11 passengers. I counted them on with the kind of attention I'd never given anything in my life, not just faces, but hands, shoes, the way they walked, the sound their feet made on the gangway. I noted each one. I committed each one to memory. 11 on. The fog was the heaviest I'd seen. I couldn't see Maine 3 feet ahead of me. The radar showed our track and nothing else. The GPS was solid. The horn sounded every 60 seconds, each blast swallowed immediately, as if the fog ate sound. 9 minutes into the crossing, at approximately 8:02 p.m., the radar painted something. Not a vessel. Not the formless density shadow from 2 years prior. This was a distinct return, hard-edged, consistent, the kind of contact you'd get from a steel hull, but it was in a position where no vessel should have been. Directly astern, 40 yards back, matching our speed and heading exactly. I watched it for 1 full minute. It held position. 40 yards. Matching. I did not alter course. Item 4. At 8:04, Marin radioed from the bow. Skipper. Horn echo. But it's wrong. What do you mean, wrong? It's ahead of us. The echo is coming from ahead of us, not behind. Our horn was mounted on the wheelhouse roof. The sound went forward and out. In fog, you sometimes get reflections off land or large vessels. But we were in open water, 1,000 yards from any shore. Ignore it, I said. Stay on the bow. Skipper, it's not an echo. It's a different horn. Different pitch. Lower. I listened. Through the wheelhouse windows, under the residual drone of our own horn's decay, I heard it. A single low note, sustained, coming from somewhere ahead and slightly to port. It sounded like a vessel horn, but the tone was wrong, too low, too long, and it didn't terminate cleanly. It faded out the way a voice fades when the speaker turns away from you. The radar showed nothing ahead. Maintain position, Marin. Do not leave the bow. Do not look for the source. Copy. At 8:06, the contact astern disappeared from the radar. At 8:07, we entered the terminal approach channel and docked without incident. 11 off. I counted them with my hands shaking. 11 real, breathing, visible people walking off the boat and into the parking lot. The manifest said 14. 3 extra names. All in my handwriting. All legible. All dead. I stopped looking at the manifests after that. I couldn't. Not because I was following item 9, because I was afraid of what I would find. Not the dead. I'd come to expect the dead. I was afraid I would find more living names. People I knew. People from the island. People who were still alive on Tuesday and whose name might appear on the manifest on Wednesday, and then I'd have to look at them knowing the Count had already claimed them and I'd have no way to warn them because what would I say? Your name appeared on my ferry manifest in my handwriting on a crossing you didn't take. The last person this happened to was Alan Proctor. You might remember the Coast Guard search. So I stopped looking. I filed my physical count, what walked off the boat, and I left the manifests in the clipboard tray and I let Paula file them without review. If she noticed discrepancies, she never said anything. Paula had been the terminal agent for 9 years. I suspect she'd learned not to read the manifests too carefully long before I started. But on October 23rd, the manifest stopped being something I could avoid. I came into the wheelhouse at 6:45 a.m. to set up for the first crossing. The clipboard was in its tray where I'd left it the night before. I pulled the blank manifest form for the day's first run, attached it to the board, and set it on the console. The form was not blank. 11 names were already written on it. In my handwriting. With a departure time of 7:30 a.m., 35 minutes in the future. I looked at the names. I recognized every one of them. They were all island regulars. They were all people who typically rode the 7:30 a.m. Saturday crossing. The manifest had been filled out before the passengers arrived. Before tickets were purchased. Before anyone had walked through the gate. I stood in the wheelhouse holding the clipboard and feeling the particular cold that comes not from temperature but from the understanding that the system you operate has been operating you. I waited. I watched the dock. At 7:12, the first passenger arrived, June Kelsey, Marin's mother. She bought her ticket, scanned through the gate, walked down the ramp. Her name was first on the pre-written manifest. By 7:28, all 11 passengers had arrived. Every name matched. Every one. In the exact order they'd boarded. The manifest hadn't predicted the passengers. The passengers had fulfilled the manifest. Or the manifest had organized the passengers. I couldn't tell the difference, and that's the point where the two possibilities stop being different. I ran the crossing. 11 on, 11 off. No discrepancies. No extra names. Clean run. As if the bay was showing me how it worked when it worked correctly, the manifest is written, the passengers appear, the count holds, and everyone arrives. The question I couldn't escape was, what happens when the manifest writes a name and the person doesn't show up? I got the answer 4 days later. October 27th. The pre-written manifest for the 3 p.m. crossing listed 8 names. By 2:55, 7 passengers had boarded. The 8th name on the list was D. Merrill. Dale Merrill was a retired lobsterman, 77, lived on the north end of the island. I knew him casually. He came to the mainland once or twice a week for groceries and to visit his daughter in Rockland. At 3 o'clock, Dale hadn't appeared. I waited 5 minutes, which is standard for a light ridership crossing. No Dale. At 3:05, I called Paula at the mainland terminal. Has Dale Merrill purchased a ticket for the 3 o'clock? No ticket sold under that name today. No ticket. No gate scan. No Dale. But his name was on the manifest, in my handwriting. I made a decision. I held the boat. At 3:11, Dale Merrill's truck appeared on the island terminal road, moving fast. He pulled into the lot, parked crooked, half-jogged down the ramp. He looked flustered. "Sorry, Corinne. Lost track of time. Almost didn't come today, was going to go tomorrow instead. But something told me I should go now." He bought his ticket at the kiosk. Scanned through. Walked on. Something told him. I ran the crossing. 8 on, 8 off. Clean. But I understood now. The manifest wasn't recording passengers. It was summoning them. And the names it wrote weren't predictions, they were instructions. The bay decided who crossed and when, and it wrote the schedule in my handwriting on association stationery, and the passengers felt the pull without knowing why, and they showed up, and the boats ran, and the count was kept. And if a name appeared and the person didn't come, like Alan Proctor hadn't come for 2 years, because Alan Proctor was dead, the count found a way to balance itself. Eventually. One way or another. It always came out even. I've been living with this for 3 weeks now. I check the manifests every morning. Every one is pre-filled. Every name is accurate. Every passenger arrives. My own name appears at the bottom of every list. Every crossing. Every day. Alan, C, written in my handwriting, always last, always present. I haven't vanished yet. I don't know what it means to be on the manifest permanently. Maybe it means I'm the operator, the count's bookkeeper, its clerk, its living hand. Maybe it means I'm next. Maybe there's no difference between those two things. Marin found the second notebook yesterday. I'd left it in the wheelhouse cabinet, careless, and she opened it thinking it was a maintenance log. She read the first 3 pages before I found her. She looked at me the way I must have looked at Gil's laminated page the first time, half skeptical, half afraid, and underneath both, the dim recognition that something she'd been sensing without naming had just been given a shape. "How long?" she asked. "Since before Gil. Since before Walt Eaton. Since there's been a boat. What do I do?" I told her what Gil told me. File the number that walks off. Don't recount. Don't look at the manifest until you're alone. And if the fog holds past the 7:45, cancel the 9:15, always, no matter what, no matter who's waiting. She asked me why. I told her the truth, which is the only thing I have left that I'm sure is mine, because in the fog, you can't tell which passengers are standing on the deck and which ones are standing in the water. And if you can't tell the difference, neither can the boat. She nodded. She didn't argue. She put the notebook back in the cabinet and went to check the engine room, and she hasn't mentioned it since, and I don't think she will, because that's how it works. You learn, and then you carry it, and then one day you hand it to the next person and they carry it, and the ferry runs, and the count is kept, and the bay moves everyone it needs to move between the places they need to go. This morning I went to the Hughes Island Cemetery before my shift. I walked the old section, the part that faces east. I counted the stones. There were 3 new ones. They hadn't been placed by any gravedigger or monument company. They were just there, at the end of the Hughes row, rough-cut granite, weathered as if they'd been standing for 100 years. One read, Tessier, G. 1943 to 2025. One read, Proctor, A. 1980 to 2024. The third was blank. Clean granite. No name, no dates. But it was set in the ground at the same depth as the others, and the grass around its base had grown in, and when I touched it, it was warm. Not from the sun. The sun wasn't up yet. I knelt there in the half-dark with my hand on the stone that was waiting for its name, and I listened to the bay. The fog was coming in. I could see it building on the horizon, a gray wall moving slowly toward the islands, and behind it or beneath it or woven through it, I could hear the sound. Low. Rhythmic. Patient. The 7:30 manifest is already written. 14 names. Mine is last. The fog will be here by noon. I'm going to run the boat.